Good morning, students. Welcome to the subject of productions and operations management. We are dealing with unit number 5, that is related to aggregate planning and maintenance management. This is the second part of the same unit, right? In the first part, we have introduced ourselves that this aggregate planning and maintenance management is such a unit which can be divided into three main portions, that is aggregate planning and its relevant topics, right? Capacity planning and its relevant topic, and the third part would be maintenance management. So here in the first session we have already introduced ourselves to aggregate planning. So first of all, what we will be dealing is aggregate planning and its aspects, right? And we'll continue the aspects that we started in the previous lecture, and here then after the completion of this aggregate planning we'll be taking up with the CRP, that is capacity requirement planning, and then comes up is maintenance management. So these three aspects has been divided because we'll come to know exactly in what heading, under what main point, what aspects can be cleared out or it can be covered. So to make the chapter easy, to make the unit easy to understand, we have divided into three parts, right? The things are available in the textbook also, but this may be a little tricky one. If you directly read from the text, it may not be that clear, right? So we'll be learning each portion in a separate form so that we can understand and we can relate the whole thing very well. Okay, coming back to aggregate planning, we started with the introduction of the aggregate planning and definition portion we have done in the previous lecture, right? What we are going to do here is we'll refresh a little bit and then we start with the continuing aspects, right? Let us just check it out. What is aggregate planning? See, aggregate means taking the sum total, right? So what will happen in a business is it will always strive to see that we can fulfill the demand on the basis of whatever the requirement we have. That means whatever the customers requirements are there, we'll be able to fulfill those requirements based on whatever the existing capacity of the firm may be. And when we try to find balance this in a short period of time means within 6 to 18 months, that planning is known as aggregate planning. Why it is aggregate? Because here we don't talk about a single product, rather we take the whole product line or the family of the product is taken together, and then on the basis of that the demand is being expected, or say demand is forecasted. Depending on those demand forecasting, what is done, that is matched with the existing capacity. Capacity means all the inputs that you have right now. It may be including man, machines, material and money, whatever you have, and you know that this is scarce in nature. So every time to meet with the demand, say between 6 to 18 months, it may not be possible to change the whole scenario or change the whole existing capacity of the company. Instead, what is done is that few changes are made in the inputs, maybe man, machines and materials and money, how they are to be used so that maximum demand can be satisfied. When you make such a kind of planning for the period of specifically 6 to 18 months, because this period is such which is neither too short nor it is too long, because if too long it is, then we make strategic planning for it, right? Because it takes maybe investment, it takes new plans, it may take the innovative ideas of the firm, and then we plan out something. So that may include a part of strategic planning. Here we are not doing the strategic planning, or we are not taking up the period of 5-10 years. Instead, we want to plan out the immediate demand that we wish to satisfy. Then or the demand that you forecast, or with the help of market research, you get to know that this is somewhat expected demand of a particular product that you produce. Then what do? Then we try to manipulate, or we try to use whatever the existing capacity we have. And how do we strike the balance between the capacity that we have and the demand that will rise in the near future? When we try to find out, or then when we try to strike a balance, that is what is known as aggregate planning, right? So that is what we have tried to explain here. I'll read few of the points because that makes sense also when we are relating to the other points that we'll study today. Thus, planning for such different time period is termed as aggregate planning. It is such a kind of approach to be taken up with the planning for the intermediate time period. This is the planning period for 6 to 18 months. What it does, it deals with developing different ways to utilize facilities and resources at different levels so as to meet the demand rising between these 6 to 18 months. Thus, aggregate planning is important to an organization which wants to optimize, means maximize its operational activity, because it helps in balancing the short-term production plans and long-term strategic plans. That means when a company wants to say balance between the short-term or the intermediate planning with that, and it wants to coincide with the strategic planning that it has done for a long period of time, aggregate planning is a must. Because with the help of aggregate planning, what can we do is we can make an organization optimize the use of the resources. Optimize the use of resources means it can make the maximum use of whatever the existing resources it has. How it can make the use of these resources? When you make the planning done for this particular period of 6 to 18 months, and you try to balance and you try to meet the demand that is about to rise, then that is what is known as aggregate planning. Thus, increasing the new capacity, naturally, see, between 6 to 18 months is such a period of time wherein you cannot be having a new capacity that you want to install. You can't have the capacity enlargement. Then at that time, what can be done? But the manpower requirement can be adjusted, inventory level can be adjusted and changed. That means current assets can be used to or made to work, or current assets can be so adjusted that you can meet the demand. But as far as the fixed assets and its installations, or say having the new capacity installed, that may not be possible in this period of time, right? Because demand again keeps on fluctuating. So every time you can't have a new installment done for the rising demand. Say, if I gave you the example in the previous session that if 200 articles are produced by a firm, and there is expectation of say 300 to 400 articles, then these items can for the manufacturing of these many items, and it's a demand that may be rising between 6 to 18 months. That is not possible that you will have one more or two more say machines or maybe installations. That may not be a viable decision. Then what can be done? Then at that time, what do we do? That with the help of aggregate planning, we try to see that whatever the current assets are, that can be used or that can be made to optimum use, so that you are not increasing the cost, and at the same time what you are doing is you are trying to meet the demand also. Like that, company is trying to earn the profit with the aggregate planning, and it's a part of strategic planning, right? So this is how the objectives or maybe the long-term objectives of the firm can also be achieved. So it's a kind of decision that reflects that if you want to have the output rate, you want to make the changes in employment level, in the inventory level, you can make the changes in the subcontracting level, then you can have the output produced which may be demanded by the customer. So it's like arranging it's a kind of temporary planning done for the arrangement or for meeting of the demand between 6 to 18 months. Here you are not making major changes in the capacities. Instead, whatever the resources we have, we try to use them to its full, right? Thus, if a unit wish to take up with AP, that means aggregate planning, it requires appropriate information on three things. These are the key things which we must understand, that if AP is to be done by the firm, then what it should have the information about? It should have the information about the available resources. Naturally, what man, machines, materials or money do I have right now, right? Against it, whatever the expected demand forecasts is there, that means whatever is being forecasted, I should have the complete information about that. And the third part is important, that's a bridge. That means they are the policies regarding the changes required. That means if I want to meet the demand that is about to rise, I should have proper information about it. I should have information about the available resources, and then I should have such a kind of policy framework through which I can make the required changes in the inputs that I have. That means whatever the existing capacity I have, I make the changes, and accordingly I can have the goods produced which will meet my expected demand. This is when you do, and that is what is important is the period of time, that is 6 to 18 months. When we do something for this particular time period, then we can name it as aggregate planning, right? So at the end of aggregate planning, suppose if my firm does the aggregate planning, what do I'll have as a result? Then that means beforehand, before going for the actual production, I'll get the total cost of my plan, and again I'll come to know about the projected level. That means projected means something for future, for the near future of 6 to 18 months. I'll come to know what will be the level of inventory, what will be the output, what will be the employment, and likewise, right? Thus it's a kind of arrangement which the enterprise tries to strike a balance between the inputs and the future aggregate demand. As the short term is arranged, and thus current assets can be changed and not the fixed ones. Fixed assets cannot be touched, it cannot be used instead, or it cannot be say changed for a short period of time, because the time period is intermediate, neither it's not too long, so we will not make any new capacities there, will not install new capacities. Instead what we will try to do is, we'll try to make certain kind of arrangements with the existing capacity, and when we do this, it is said to be aggregate planning. It's done to reduce the cost and meet the increasing demand naturally. Whether strategic planning is long-term planning, AP is a part of it, done for the intermediate period of 6 to 18 months. I hope the concept of AP is clear to you, right? That means it is such a kind of, what we have to remember, it is such a kind of planning done for 6 to 18 months. Why it is done? So that we can meet the demand rising in this period with the existing capacity. We are not trying to increase the installed capacity. On the other hand, what we are trying to do is, with whatever the man, machines, materials do we have, we are trying to manipulate them, we are trying to make them to use, and then we are trying to produce whatever the items that are demanded with the lowest cost and with the existing capacity. When this type of arrangement is done by the enterprise, we say that an enterprise is taking up with aggregate planning, right? Here the definition slide has been repeated. We are moving towards the next area, that is known as the importance. What is the importance of aggregate planning? Now that we know what is aggregate planning, I think importance should be pretty clear to you, right? Let us begin with number 1. Achieving financial goals by reducing overall variable cost and improving the bottom line. Naturally, whenever a kind of planning is taken up in a business, it is always that cost effective or financial goals, to meet the financial goals is one of the reason. And aggregate planning, with the aggregate planning, what do we come to know? We come to know about the overall variable cost. So we are not increasing that variable cost, on the contrary, we make them to the best use and we try to meet the bottom line. That is the first importance. Number 2, it helps in minimizing the cost and maximizing profit, because beforehand you come to know that with the existing men, machines or materials and money that we have right now, whatever we can do, that can be known to us, and that is why we can minimize the cost. At the same time, we can maximize the profit by meeting the demand of the customers and earning the revenues or maybe the profits out of it. The third one, maximum use of available production facilities or the capacity. That means whatever existing things do we have, yes, we do make the changes in the current assets, but we don't make the changes in the major fixed assets. Like, we are not trying to get another site for the production, we are not trying to install few more high-tech machines. Instead, what do we do is, we try to make the arrangement in such a manner that with whatever we have, and with a little bit of investment in the current assets, and with the little bit of adjustment in the current assets that we have, we can meet the demand, and that is why we can make the maximum use of facilities. Next, provide customer delight by matching the demand and reducing waiting time for the customers. That means there is a timely deliveries. Naturally, beforehand we are trying to forecast the demand, and that forecasted demand has been already worked out, right? So what happens is you don't have to rush up, or there may not be any kind of say time lag. What happens is exactly whenever the customer demands it, we are ready with the product. So timely delivery is there. You can match the demand very easily. There is no waiting time for the customers. On the contrary, what we do is we can retain those customers even for the future. Next comes up is it helps to adjust the workforce, inventory requirement, machines usages, and thereby also improves the delivery time. Naturally, because this is a planning, and planning is done for future. That means for future when you are doing something, that means you make the adjustments that if this much workforce is there, suppose this much inventory is available, machines can be made to use, and ultimately you can improve its production capacity. You can improve its activities or operational activities in a much better way. See, without planning, if you turn up or if any company is taking up with the short term demand meeting without any kind of planning, it may so happen that few of the things may not be worked out properly, or few of the requirements may not be taken up into consideration. Then it may be a total chaos. But here, because aggregate planning is done for future and it is done beforehand, right, we can make the best adjustment as far as the workforce is concerned, inventory is concerned, machine usages is concerned, and likewise thus it improves the overall production cycle also, and like that we can meet the delivery time also, right? The next comes up is this helps to have a high goodwill. Naturally, you will put up a good reputation in the market, and also smoothens the production process by proper planning. In fact, if you want to take up with management, it is the planning that comes up the foremost, and here we are doing the same with the aggregate planning. What are we trying to do is we are trying to make the adjustments, we are trying to smoothen up the process, right? So ultimately what will happen is it will affect the goodwill of the firm, it will positively build up the reputation of the firm in the market. So that's also one of the reason that a company does with the aggregate planning. Next, it reduces the investment in inventory stocking. Naturally, excessive inventory blockage is controlled as inventory level is adjusted as per the aggregate demand. If you are doing aggregate demand, means for the next 6 to 18 months only you will have to plan out, right? After that 18 months are over, you will again plan out for next 6 to 18 months. Means unnecessary blockage of the capital can be avoided, excessive investment can be avoided with the inventory stocking, right? So what happens ultimately is we can plan out better, we can have the money on hand which can be used for other purposes, and like that unnecessary blockage can be avoided. Again, it helps in appropriate use of workforce. Naturally, the idle time of the workforce can be made to use, right? If you want to make them use for overtime, that can be done. Supposing if for time being period, if you want to hire or you want to lay off some kind of labor, that can be easily done if you are doing the aggregate planning, because it will tell us exactly about the requirement of men, machines, materials for a period of 6 to 18 months. To meet that demand of 6 to 18 months, it will give us a clear cut idea. Next, it helps in minimizing the sudden changes in the output by orderly and systematic transaction during rise and fall in demand, because you are making a forecast, because a kind of demand forecasting is done for the product. What can be done is you can have the systematic and orderly transactions for all the types of product, and the rise and fall in the demand can be adjusted very well. So neither you are coming up with the overstocking during the fall in demand, and neither you are running short of those items when there is rise in demand. So exactly you can match these things very easily. The business planning can be made proactive. Proactive means beforehand you can make the business ready or alert. So before the problem arises, there is a proactive activities done rather than reactive. Reactive is after the action is there is reaction. Here when we call about the term, or when we try to understand the term proactive, means business is proactive. Proactive in the sense, before the problem arises, or say before there is the situation of rise in the demand, but we don't have the requirement of the fulfillment of the demand. Such a situation does not arise when you are taking up with aggregate planning. Instead, the company is proactive, it is active beforehand to meet the problems, to sort out with the problems. Again, it helps the organization to identify the best options so that it can meet the demand easily. See, I told you in the beginning also that here when we are doing aggregate planning, we don't touch the fixed assets, we don't touch the fixed investment and installations. Rather, we try to see that with whatever existing capacities that we have, and current assets can be manipulated, current assets can be adjusted so well to meet the demand. So we can identify those best options, that if manpower is being made to use, whether we can, if machines are stable, that means if we have 5 machines and 5 people, but if the demand of that product is going to rise, we cannot install 2 more machines at the same time, or we can have 5 more people, or maybe 3 more labor can be hired, so that they can be able to finish the work within the stipulated time period. So we can make the optimum utilization, or we can have the best options of production. That is the advantage of aggregate planning. It assists in knowing about the inefficiencies that exist within the organization. Even at the times of aggregate planning, we come to know that if any kind of, say, loopholes are there, any kind of inefficiencies are there, then that can be sorted out well. Will not go it will not prove to be a disastrous at the time of meeting the demand, because beforehand આપણે પહેલેથી જ જોઈ શકીએ છીએ કે પહેલેથી જ આપણે નક્કી કરી શકીએ છીએ કે these may be the things, these may be the requirement. On the contrary, આપણી પાસે એ વસ્તુ છે કે નથી, તો we can make the adjustment for it, and likewise we can find out the loopholes, we can get the limitations on hand, and we can sort it out. So those inefficiencies can be worked out. Next comes up is, it encourages the optimized utilization of space. Whatever the space we have, whatever the layout may be there, that can be used to the best. The facilities that are used by the organization for manufacturing purpose are too costly, and it is not feasible to own or rent at all the times. That means આટલી જ સ્પેસ છે, સ્પેસ એવી લિમિટેશન છે કોઈ પણ ઓર્ગેનાઇઝેશનની, જે ડિમાન્ડની ના વધવાથી કે એના ઘટવાથી we cannot make the alterations in these areas. So this space is to be used to the maximum, or this has to be optimally used. And at that time, when we are taking up with aggregate planning, we exactly come to know that whether we'll be able to utilize the space to its best or not, or we can make the space used for, say, shifts, right? So that ultimately what is done is, we can meet the production to meet the, or we can make the production to meet the demand. And this is what can be done with the help of aggregate planning. So here what we have seen are all the 13 points which tells us the importance, the aims, the need, or maybe to an extent advantages or merits of aggregate planning. So if a firm is taking up with aggregate planning, then what happens is, it can get these many types of advantage. Before going for the advantages or importances, what is important is to understand the concept of AP, right? If you understand the concept of AP well, then when you relate the importance, it comes up fast to you, and it comes up clearly also. Alright, we are moving towards the next part. Up till now what we have seen is, we have checked out with the introduction, we have done with the definitions, we have also taken up with importance, and now we are moving towards the fourth point, that is approaches, right? Let us see what is approach. The process of AP takes into consideration 2 factors, the overall level of output and the capacity that is required to produce it. 2 things are very important in AP. One is, what will be the overall output level of the product, right? Overall કેટલું output આપણે કરવું પડશે, અને એની સામે what is the other aspect, the capacity that is required to produce it. That means એને આટલું produce, આ level of output produce કરવા માટે what is the capacity available with us in the terms of men, material, money, machines, etc. That means whatever the requirement we have, or whatever the capacity we have, whatever manpower, material, say money, machines, whatever we have, are we able to meet, or will we be able to meet the overall output or not? These two things are to be balanced, right? So to balance these two things, there are two basic concepts, or there are two basic approaches, right, to take up with this AP. You can take up the AP in with two different approaches, and that is what we will learn separately, one by one, with an example, right? So here it is estimating the capacity that will be required to produce an aggregate or grouping of the company's product. One is top down approach and the other one is bottom up approach. Top down means something that falls from top to bottom, and bottom up is just the reverse of the of it. That means that we start from the bottom level, right? This is the these are the two approaches that we'll be learning one by one. Why it is done? So that we can take up aggregate planning properly. All right, so let us start with the top down approach. In this session we will take up with one approach only. In the next session we take up with the bottom up approach, right? Let us try to understand this top down approach, and then with an example we sum up the lecture. All right, now when we are dealing with AP, we are already clear that what is AP, right? AP is such a kind of planning done by an organization to meet the demand that is rising between 6 to 18 months, whatever the requirements are between 6 to 18 months of the market, that we are trying to pre-plan it with whatever existing capacity do we have. And this is what, when we try to strike a balance, that whatever we have right now and whatever is expected by the customer, when we try to strike a balance between these two things, between these two ends, by making proper planning, is known as aggregate planning, right? Now how that can be done? Then for that there are two approaches: top down approach, bottom up approach. First what we are talking about is top down approach, right? Now what is this all about? Let us see it. Top down approach to aggregate planning involves development of entire plan by working at the highest level of consolidation or combining the products. That means top down approach is such a kind of aggregate planning in which the entire planning is done at the top level, highest level, and what we do, we consolidate the demand, we consolidate the products. Consolidation is combining. Suppose if a company is producing 5 types of similar products, that means there in a product line there are 5 products available related to each other. Now at top down approach, what do? We take the aggregation of these 5 products together. A, B, C, D products are there. Suppose A, B, C, D, E. Then what we do is we combine these A to E products together. We try to consolidate its demand. We try to find out and forecast the demand for each of these 5 products in a consolidated manner, means in a combined form. And then we try to say make a pseudo product, and then we disintegrate. What it is all about, that we will see it in the further portion. But what is important is here, at highest level the entire plan is being worked out, right? At the highest level it is being worked out by combining all the types of products. That is one thing. Next, it consolidates the products into an average product and then develops an overall plan. That means if A, B, C, D, E are the products of the same product line, then there is a consolidation. These all products are made together, or they are brought together, and an average product. Average product is such a kind of product which has the characteristics of all these A, B, C, D, E type of product, and then an average is being found out. So with that average, what we can do is, for producing this average product, whatever requirements are, we try to make the arrangement for the same, and then we try to work out on each product. This is what is known as the top down approach. Now what happens in this approach? Under this approach, the top management team plans for the future production through consolidation of company's product. As I told you, it is based on the assumption that if the proper amount of capacity is available, the right amount of the capacity for all the parts will be available. That means with the help of consolidation, an assumption is made that if we are able to produce A, B, C, D, E product in a consolidated form with the average product say Z, then what we will be trying, what we'll be able to do is, by planning this much, it is clear that if Z product, which is an average product or which is a fictitious product, if we are trying to make that and everything is available to us, that means to produce the product A, B, C, D, E individually, things are present with us, and if not, then we can make the changes accordingly in each section. This is what is the approach all about. It is based on pseudo product. Pseudo is always a fictitious thing, imaginary thing, right? So here what is done is A, B, C, D, E product are then combined to make a fictitious products. Fictitious product કે pseudo product કઈ ટાઈપનું પ્રોડક્ટ છે જેની અંદર A, B, C, D, E જેટલાય પ્રોડક્ટ છે બધાની કેરેક્ટરિસ્ટિક્સ લગભગ હાજર હોય in the pseudo product. With that, we can try to find out that if this product can be made, average product can be made with the existing capacity, or whatever the changes are required can be done. That means all the 5 categories of product can be prepared. With this assumption in mind, the top-down approach is worked out in the organization. The main plan is then disintegration. I told you, once the pseudo product is ready, then what do? We disintegrate. We subdivide the whole plan. We disintegrate and we try to find out the capacity that is to be allocated to the different family of the product, right? Thus, it consolidates the product into an average product and then develops an overall plan for it. But if the product mix, yes, what is important is there is too much of varied type of product mix, then at that time it may be difficult to disintegrate at the lower level. I'll come to that point once the example is before you, right? So if you have multiple products or maybe very mixed type of products are produced, then at that time the disintegration may be difficult. But if not, then this is the best approach through which we can have the aggregate planning done. Thus, it can be simply understood with the following stages. See, the whole top-down approach, if we want to understand simply, then we can divide it into 3 stages. Number 1, step 1, consolidation of demand. Consolidation means combining of what then, if a company is producing, say, the product having the products of same product line, that means A, B, C, D are, say A, B, C, D, E are the products of the same product line, then at first stage what we do, we consolidate them, we bring it together, we try to find out the demand of the whole of these 5 products. Then what do we do at the second part? In the second stage, we try to bring out the pseudo product. That means we try to have the fictitious product prepared having the characteristics of all the average product line. That means whatever the average product lines are, whatever the products are, all the characteristics of all these products are present supposingly in this pseudo product. Then what can we do? We can find out that if this product can be produced and if you need these many things to produce this, then you can make the arrangement related to man, machines, material regarding the production of A, B, C, D, E say product, and that is what is known as the disintegration. Means once you are preparing the pseudo product, what we can do is, on the basis of the result of the pseudo product, what we can do, we can disintegrate, we can disallocate all the plans, we can make the sub plans for each one of the items, and likewise we can have the resources and the capacity utilization, we can make the changes in the capacity as required. Now let us try to understand this with the help of an example here. If you try to study the example here, see, it is the product on one side, PQR is the company, and it is producing A, B, C types of product. They are the same product, or they are the related product in a same product line, right? Now what it tries to does is, here it tries to find out the future demand, tentative future demand between 6 to 18 months. For example, in this example, it has been said that if A products are demanded in 200 quantities, B may be in 300 quantities, and C may be expected to have the demand of 400 quantities. That means if you want to supply A, B, C items in the market, then you must produce 900 products 900 unit. Now this is what is known as the consolidated demand. That means 900 units are to be produced. This is the consolidated capacity that we need to have, and to produce these 900 units we must have everything with us, and that is what is being planned out. So let us just revise for one more time. At first stage, what are we doing? We are consolidating. Consolidating what? Consolidating all the products. For example, in our company, it is A, B and C products that are being produced. And all these three have, if you have noticed, have three different types of demands. 200 units are required for A product, 300 units for B and 400 units for C. That means in all, if we want to meet the demand of ABC in near future of 6 to 18 months, what we should have? We should have 900 units with us. This is what is known as consolidated demand, and to meet this demand we should have enough capacity. Is this first clear? Right? Then comes up the second stage. Now, to produce these 200 units, we may require different types of manpower, machines and materials. And that example has been also provided, that if the requirement to produce A item, maybe 3 men are required, 4 machines are required and 200 materials are required. Again, for B, it is like 4 manpower is required, 3 machines are required and maybe 300 material is required. For C, it is 5 manpower that may be required or 5 machines that may be made to use and materials may be 400 units. That means in all, if we have this much, then we'll be able to produce 900 units. That is what we are trying to say. That means if we want to produce then 900 units, first what we are doing? We are consolidating, means we are summing up, we are aggregating everything together. Then at the second stage, what do? We try to find out, or we even try to see that whatever the requirements may be. At the second stage, what we do is we take up with the pseudo product, that with this arrangement, with this existing capacity, we will be producing an average product Z. Right? Hypothetical product Z is produced. Now Z ની ખાસિયત શું છે? તો એની અંદર A ની characteristics પણ હોય, B ની પણ હોય અને C ની પણ હોય. That means this is a fictitious product Z that is produced. હવે ત્રણેયની એનામાં જો characteristics હોય તો that means કે એ ત્રણેયના જે specifications છે એ હાજર હોવા જોઈએ, અને એ આપણી existing capacity અત્યારે પૂરું પાડી શકશે કે નહીં, that we can find out ultimately. So Z would be the pseudo product or fictitious or imaginary product that will be worked out. Right? And then once we come to know that okay, if we want to produce Z product with the existing capacity, or we may need these many changes, then accordingly we at the third point or third stage, what do? We disintegrate. That means then whatever the existing capacity is, we try to disintegrate, we try to disallocate with the existing capacity to produce A, to produce B and C. That means from top, demand consolidation to pseudo product to disintegration, we are trying to balance that whatever the existing capacity is and whatever the changes are required, at the end we will be able to meet the demand of 900 units. And furthermore, we will even be able to find out that whether we will be able to meet the demand of product A of 200 units, product B 300 units and product C 400 units likewise. This is how, with the help of this top-down approach, we are trying to make the aggregate planning. I repeat, aggregate planning, when done with top-down approach, you have to remember 3 stages. Number 1, step 1, that is consolidated capacity and demand. Right? In the first line, we have seen the demand, capacity, demand, consolidation. In the second A and B part, that means requirements have been checked out. After doing that, at the second stage, what are we doing? We are trying to make the pseudo product, that is said to be the fictitious product is being made or being worked out. And then after taking that pseudo product in mind, because it has all the characteristics of all the product that we are going to produce, we then can disintegrate. We can again disallocate to A, B, C individual product and how are we going to produce with the existing capacity or whatever the changes required. When we try to do this, or when we try to take up aggregate planning with these 3 points or these 3 stages, it is said to be taking up with the top down approach. Consolidation, number 2 pseudo product, and number 3 disintegration. So this is what is top down approach, right? When we meet next, we shall be taking up with the another approach, that is bottom up approach. For now, it's a goodbye from my side. Please make the notes for it, so that ultimately the example is important. If you keep the example before you, then the top down approach and the bottom up approach that we'll be doing in the next session will be clear to you, and we'll be able to explain how aggregate planning is done with the help of these 2 approaches. By the time we meet next, it's a goodbye from my side. Take care and we'll meet soon. Thank you.